Some hairs are wilder than others. And this one is the Old West, or Rick Vaughn. You click the thumbnail so you know what's coming. What I didn't know was coming was how much this bill was going to, in the end, make me a better maker overall. A Rube Goldberg machine is impossible to fully plan out. Of course, I had a general scope and some interesting actions that I wanted to happen, but you kind of need to let the result of one action determine how the next begins. I didn't get this at the start, and I'm trying to figure out this clamp sliding domino situation that would live somewhere in the middle of the chain reaction. After really analyzing how it would fit in the system, I got stuck thinking and not doing. Sometimes you need a little kick of productivity to get the ball rolling on a project. And the best medicine for that is low-hanging fruit. In any other project, this could be knolling your tools or lumber, marking some potential pieces. Anything that is small scale seems inconsequential, but has to get done nonetheless. I need some structures built to hang all this stuff on, so I started putting that up. Don't start with step 7. You don't cut your joinery before you mill your lumber. In a Rube Goldberg machine, you figure out step 1, or the only part that needs human intervention, and step 100, or the final result of everything before it. Figure out what your step number 1 is. Mine is fire. And you'll see what I've got for step 100. I thought it would be best to put as much of this together on the ground as I could, but then I'm not getting an accurate bead on what gravity is doing to the machine. So I had to put the first module in place. This whole machine is composed of 7 individual modules. That way I can have some mini goals throughout this lengthy build. Building in smaller sections, or in your case, subsets of tasks to complete a project, gives you more frequent dopamine hits to keep going and allows your headspace to be more involved on a focused action rather than all of the pieces that need shaped. In constructing this machine, I think I used every tool that I own. So building in segments was very helpful in pulling out just what I need for that module and pausing to sort everything away in between modules. I wanted this machine to be heavily workshop themed, so many of the actions use tools or other workshop paraphernalia rather than just balls, trains, and dominoes. That meant that many things had to be used in ways very different than their design dictates. This was a great exercise in out-of-the-box thinking and what's possible with the common items in your shop. You know, you start woodworking and you think, I'm gonna cut a few things, glue some stuff together, but greasing up a rope? No. And you all have seen the straw trick for clearing glue from a corner and using scraps as stir sticks. I think the connection to regular shop projects is obvious. I've been working on vertical surfaces so far, so the theme has been preserving gravity. Besides the potential energy stored elastically, it's the one free force that I can count on to move things along. So I try not to dip too low and get to the floor where gravity won't work for me anymore. Preserve everything as much as you can when building anything. Leave your pieces oversized for as long as possible so you can slice off chip outs or snipe. And when you consider preservation at the very onset of a project, you can maybe get all legs of a table from a single board and not be left with an offcut that's 1 inch too small to become the 4th leg. I got pretty good at crafting small parts from building this machine, like this tiny wedge that can be pulled out to allow a car to roll. Even though this thing ends up being massive and filling my 1,000 square foot shop, every action needed little pegs or tiny hinges or mini wedges to chalk a tire. So far I've kept my workbench clear, but this next module will sit there. Instead of just setting everything up in orientation, I'll build it on a piece of plywood so I can move it out of the way if I need to use the table saw or real estate on the bench. I covered up the drill press at the beginning, but I figured I could drill holes old school style and be fine, but the table saw is a different story. Think about not painting yourself into a corner with where you are assembling or queuing up lumber or tools. This is especially true if your main assembly table doubles as your outfeed table, and you bump into things when pushing stock through your table saw. Maybe you just put finish on a project, or worse, have a delicate glue up that you now have to move. Does anyone else neglect their hot glue gun? I kinda wrote it off as a tool for making silly kid crafts, but after this build, I'm gonna work it in a lot more often. The bond is pretty strong. When I've had to pull pieces off, they end up ripping the fibers of the wood rather than breaking cleanly at the glue seam. And it dries just as fast as CA with activator. My only gripe is the spiderweb strings that it leaves behind, which I haven't yet figured out how to minimize. Each action I would build, see what direction and with what power the end would produce, and work on the next action to match that energy. These machines force you to think in 3D space with an engineer's mind. So many times I've had to come up with a way to turn horizontal motion into vertical motion and at 90 degrees. Considering that almost every time your first idea doesn't work, I've had to create several hundred solutions on this project, and I feel better about my ability to fix anything, however janky it may be. Eliminate, or at least minimize, risk wherever you can. Get the tough joinery, hand-chiseled sections, or parts that have to line up perfectly out of the way early. That way, if you mess up those difficult procedures, you're only having to restart on a piece that you worked on for 5 minutes rather than half a day. As I'm building this, I'll put in brakes in the system to prevent it from going off when I don't want it to. Some of this stuff is kind of delicate, and I don't want a slam door on the other side of the house to seismically trigger a chain reaction. Only when I'm ready to set it off will I arm the system. Get used to failing. I have a fail or two on most projects, but this taught me to be much more patient because I failed constantly.
Should have put a drainage hole. You. Bitch. It fell off of the track. Bitch. Oh. You. That's never happened before. If you've ever seen a Rube Goldberg machine run, it goes pretty quickly and can be rather chaotic in trying to follow what's happening. So in short order, I'll put out a follow-up video where I'll do the slow-mo and talk about the interesting mechanisms and little Easter eggs hidden within the machine. So here's what you came for. All right, light it. Heads up.